Det är knappt 10 år sedan den amerikanska kvinnorörelsen gick ut hårt och det var en bitter kamp. Ner med kvinnan som sexsymbol och i soptunnan med bysthållarna. Ner med männen, ner med äktenskapet. Protesterna gick som en våg. Men idag har det skett en förändring. Vi hade fel, vi gick för långt, säger man. Det är inget fel att vara kvinnlig och det är inget fel att vara hemmafru. Om man är beredd att beklaga överdrifterna och misstagen som begåtts.
There were some extremists in the women's movement that in a certain period advocated what I felt was a pseudo-radical sexual politics, which made too literal analogy with class warfare or the battle against racial oppression, looking at the relationship of woman and man in a way that denied the reality of the interdependence and of the human, biological, sexual, social, well, our need for each other. But this other sexual politics seemed to be saying woman is a man, woman is a class rising up, oppressed class rising up against man as a class, the oppressors, down with men, down with marriage, down with even child bearing, down with you know, everything that women had done to please or attract men, down with this sexual relationship between this, all of that. And this man-hating, no, that's true. It was in the extremist fringe of the movement. But I could wish that those mistakes had not been made. I do feel that that kind of thing would alienate women that, you know, are not about to give up their relationships or need for love and be loved, which for most women is men, or their real bonds with their children, or even the frivolity and fun of fashion, you see. I'm not myself, all right, willing to give up those things. The better you feel about yourself as a person, the better you feel about yourself as a woman, the more you can express it more joyously in your dress and more freely. In other words, sometimes you feel like dressing up, you know, getting all dressed up, and sometimes you feel like wearing blue jeans. And both are all right, you know, both. Freedom, some flexibility. It is not at all a question of denying femininity. You know, that for some few, there is a reactive period where they would throw the baby out with the bathwater, where they have got a concept of the trapped housewife that it's so miserable being a woman that they want any of these symbols of this that they would throw away. But that is a phase that some women may go through on their way to liberation, but when they reach a real liberation, they can affirm the traditional parts about being a woman that they want to use in a new context. You know, they can cook for the pleasure of it or the necessity of it without, but not
MS var den första stora kvinnotidningen som var gjord av kvinnor. Tidningen har kämpat för lika rättigheter och varit ute i alla strider. Mot Miss Amerika-tävlingar, mot kvinnosymbolen i sexklubbarna, mot de exklusiva New York-barerna och restaurangerna där inga kvinnor serverades. Och man har varit i alla hårda debatter och i alla diskussioner.
All right, will you please sit down or be removed from the...
No, we are going to sit down. Why don't you give us some solid to our questions? It was very clear tonight that this myth of male protection of women does not exist.
If you had equality between men and women, you couldn't have marriage. Just like people say, well, couldn't we get rid of the bad things about marriage? Couldn't you have gotten rid of the bad things about slavery?
Det där ligger bakom nu. Man vill inte tala om att man hade fel, men det är en utveckling som har skett. Och det är något nytt som har kommit till.
The change is not the repudiation of anything. Change is growth. Change is evolution. And many factors in women's lives have changed in this country, so that the issues that were important 7 years ago have moved into a different perspective now. For example, one of the very early psychological issues that had to be explored was anger. Was the venting of anger, the recognition of anger, women telling each other how angry they were about the frustrations of their lives. So we move on from that. What we write about in the magazine moves on from that. We move on, for example, as we did in our December issue, to what we discussed in the issue as the new intimacy. What kind of relationships are possible between women and men once the anger has happened, once the question of equality has been addressed? What is intimacy like between two people who have discussed inequality, who have explored inequality and committed themselves to equality? Well, that topic wasn't appropriate 7 years ago. It's appropriate now because of all the thinking and talking and experience that's gone between. So that's an example of the psychological issue, how a psychological issue can evolve. There are comparable patterns of evolution in political issues, too, obviously.